Hello everyone. Hope all of you are safe and healthy. Welcome to IS Baba's Rapid Revision Series for Prelims 2021. This is session 31 and day 43. And the topics we have are Indian polity, central government and the governor. So these are the hot topics we are going to discuss. The CAA and the Assam Accord. And then the ad hoc judges. Then the Union of States due to the resolution passed by Tamil Nadu government. Then supplementary grants. Then Ministry of Cooperation that was established recently. Then leader of opposition, and then political parties registration tracking management system or the PPRTMS, and then the NHRC and borrowing power of the states, and then the governor. Now coming to the first one, CAA and the Assam Accord. Friends, we know that CAA, Assam Accord, National Registry of Citizens, National Population Register, they are all in news. Now we discuss what are the linkages between them. Coming to first Assam Accord. Friends, we know that Assam Accord was signed in 1985 between Rajiv Gandhi government and All Assam Students Union. So what are the clauses it provided? It provided that all migrants prior to January 1st, 1966 to be accepted as Indian citizens. And then all migrants who came after March 25, 1971, they had to be deported. And then the government agreed to revise the electoral database based on that date. So it has to be updated, and those people who came in between 66 and 71, 1966 and 1971, they will be accepted on a case to case basis. Then coming to Citizenship Amendment Act. So friends, these are the clauses provided by the CAA, that is to make Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, Jain and Parsi and Christian illegal migrants from Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Pakistan eligible for the citizenship of India. So here Muslims were left out, that is why it became controversial. Then when it comes to citizenship of India, the citizenship by naturalization was provided. And further, it relaxed the requirement of naturalization from 11 years to 5 years. Friends, we know that for naturalization, we have to follow some criteria. That is, applicant must have resided in India during the last 12 months as well as 11 of the previous 14 years. That is, from the date of applying to the citizenship, the last previous 12 months you should have been residing in India, and moreover in the last 14 years, 11 years you should be residing in India, and this 11 years it has been reduced to 5 years in this CAA Amendment Act. That is, instead of 11 years you should only reside for 5 years in this 14-year duration. And then coming to next, the cutoff date of citizenship is December 31, 2014. So this was contentious with the Assam Accord, friends. So Assam Accord says that March 25, 1971 is the cutoff date. So, as per the new Citizenship Amendment Act, instead of deporting those people who came after 1971, you are going to retain them if they are Hindus, if they are Sikhs, Buddhists, Christians, and if they are non-Muslims. And then all illegal proceedings against them in respect of their illegal migration or citizenship will be closed. So, in the course of fighting their citizenship, if they have been embroiled in any of the criminal cases, they will be resolved. And then people holding overseas citizens of India card can lose their status if they violate the local laws for major and minor offences. Friends, we know that the kith and kins of those people who have already become the citizens of India, they are having this OCI card and they are settling abroad, or they are settling in Pakistan, Bangladesh and Afghanistan. So even they have the chance to enter India. But however, if they are criminals or if they are indulging in criminal activities after they entering to India, they will lose their OCI card, and if they lose their OCI card, they will lose the citizenship as well. So for the kith and kins, this clause has been provided. And then the CAA also provided some of the exceptions. What were those? That is, the amendment will not apply to the Schedule 6 areas. So with this citizenship, you cannot enter a Schedule 6 area, and this will not be applicable to the inner line permit as well. So you cannot cross the inner line by this citizenship. Then come to next, the National Registry of Citizens. So what is this, friends? It is a register prepared after the census of 1951, and the NRC was published only once in 1951. After that it has not been updated at all. But Assam was the first state to update this in 1971, and in Assam it included the names of the persons along with their descendants whose name was registered in the NRC of 1951 or was found in any of the electoral rolls till the midnight of 24th March 1971. So Assam updated the NRC and it added the kith and kins of those older citizens and also the new immigrants whose names were found in the electoral rolls. But however, friends, we know that any other state of India, they haven't updated this NRC? You agree with me? Now what happens? These people who have been settling in the borders, those illegal migrants, what if they cross over Assam and if they settle in other states of India? So now Home Ministry came up with an order saying that the National Registry of Citizens will be updated in almost all the states of India. So this was mainly to curb those people who are being crossing those borders and who are entering into the mainland, or maybe they are entering into other states. But now what happens, friends? Our indigenous Islamic population will be vulnerable. So if they don't have proper documents, we can treat them like they have crossed the borders and they are being settling here illegally, and it can lead to deportation of them unnecessarily. So that is why National Registry of Citizen, it came with loggerheads to the CAA. And then coming to next, National Population Registry. Friends, National Population Register can be taken as a broader concept, and National Registry of Citizens can be taken as a subset of National Population Register. So how that is possible, friends? Because this National Population Register, it includes both the citizens as well as foreign citizens. That is, whoever is resident in India from the past 6 months, his name will be entered in the National Population Register. But for our name to be entered in the National Registry of Citizens, we have to be the citizen of India. And moreover, as per the Citizenship Rules 2003, it says that the National Registry of Citizens shall be updated on the basis of National Population Register. So now once again, this NRC, which is controversial or which makes the indigenous Muslims vulnerable, it is being decided on the basis of this National Population Register. So now this National Population Register also has many loopholes, like many Muslims or even many other religious people, they are being out of this list. They are not being updated in this list. So if their name is not in this National Population Register, automatically their name will not come in the National Registry of Citizens. You agree with me, friends? And now if their name is not in the National Registry of Citizens, then they will be deported unnecessarily. So this is all about CAA, or in other words, we can take a summary of this like this. The National Population Registry will come in the broader concept. Within that, the National Registry of Citizens, and then within that the CAA, this will exclude only the Muslims, and then comes the Assam Accord, which is related to Assam only. So by this you can visualize. Coming to next, the ad hoc judges. Friends, why was it in news? Because the Supreme Court has agreed the plan to appoint retired judges on an ad hoc basis to reduce the pendency in the high courts. So in this context, ad hoc judges will come into picture. Friends, along with the ad hoc judges, we will also revise additional judges and acting judges here. So as per Article 128 of the Constitution, attendance of a retired judge as ad hoc judge will be on the following clauses. So the Chief Justice of India, with the previous consent of the President, may request any retired judge of the Supreme Court or High Court to sit and act as a judge of the Supreme Court. So for being an ad hoc judge, you should be a retired judge. So that is the basic criteria. Then Article 224A says that the retired High Court judges can be appointed as the ad hoc judges in the High Courts. So here once again, the Chief Justice of the High Court, with previous consent of President, not the Governor, mind you friends, and may request any retired judge of the High Court to sit and act as a judge of the High Court. So for Supreme Court and High Court, for both, we have the provision for ad hoc judges. Then coming to next, Article 224 Clause 2, it says that the President can also appoint a duly qualified person as an acting judge of a High Court when a judge of that High Court is unable to perform his duties and appointed to act temporarily as a Chief Justice. So if any other judge, if he is acting as a Chief Justice of a High Court, or maybe if there is any other duty to be performed, then any qualified person, he need not be a retired judge here, friends, he can act as an acting judge. And then coming to the tenure, an acting judge holds office until the permanent judge resumes his office. So there is no fixed tenure. Until the judge is back in his work, this acting judge will be performing his job. And then coming to next, Article 224 Clause 1, it says that the President can appoint duly qualified person as additional judge of a High Court for a temporary period not exceeding 2 years. So for additional judge, there is a fixed term of 2 years. And in case there is a temporary increase in the business of a High Court, or there are arrears of work in the High Court, so if there are so many pending cases, then an additional judge can be appointed for the period of 2 years. Once again here, friends, this additional judge, he need not be a retired judge, he can be any duly qualified person. And then the constitution provides that both the additional or the acting judge cannot hold office after attaining the age of 62 years. So once again, this clause also says that a retired judge cannot be appointed as the acting judge or the additional judge. So this is the difference between an acting judge, additional judge and the ad hoc judge. Then come to next, the Union of States. Friends, why was it in news? Because Tamil Nadu government has decided to shun the usage of the term central government in its official communication and replace it with the union government. So now wherever the word central government is there, in all those places Tamil Nadu government has replaced with the word union government. Now the intent of Constituent Assembly regarding this union government. The Article 1 Clause 1, it says that the India is Bharat shall be a union of states. So nowhere central government is referred to in the constitution. Our constitution has never provided the word central government. And then on 13th December 1946, when Jawaharlal Nehru he introduced the aims and objectives of the Constituent Assembly, he said that India shall be a union of territories that are willing to join the independent sovereign republic. So once again, the aim of the Constituent Assembly says that India shall be a union of territories. And later in 1948, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar said that the drafting committee had used the word union because Indian Federation was not the result of an agreement by the units and the component units had no freedom to secede from the federation. So as you have no freedom to secede, you cannot treat the union as an agreement. So union is a legally binding concept. And then other members of Constituent Assembly, what they said that the word center or the central government in the constitution was kept away because it is a British word and it comes with a British legacy and moreover it has some centralizing tendencies. So how the Governor General of Bengal, he subordinated Bombay and Madras provinces. So such subordination is not present in the Union of India. So in all these contexts, the act of Tamil Nadu government is noble thing. We can say likewise then. Moving to next, the supplementary grants. Friends, why was it in news? Because the Minister of Finance presented the first batch of supplementary demands for grants for this financial year in Lok Sabha. So in this context, supplementary grants, excess grants, vote on credit, all will become important. So we will revise this once again. Now, supplementary grants. This occurs when the amount authorized is insufficient for that year. So the money granted for the overall budget is insufficient. So the expenditure is crossing over. In that context, in the middle of the year, supplementary grant can be provided. And then coming to excess grant. So this occurs when an excess of amount is already spent. So here friends, the money is already spent. So here you are asking the permission for those money which you have already spent. So it is voted by Lok Sabha after the financial year. And then they must be approved by the Public Accounts Committee of the Parliament before submitting to the Lok Sabha. So you have to take the permission of this PAC in order to place this bill in the House of the Parliament. So this condition is only for excess grant because the money is already spent. Then come to next, additional grants. Here in case of a new service that are not contemplated in the budget of that year. So something additional scheme has been brought in. So in that case, additional grant can be asked for. Then vote of credit. So this is like a blank check given for a scheme to the executive by the Lok Sabha. So here the scheme is not new friends, it is an older scheme, but the thing is that you are not being able to estimate the expenditure required for this scheme. So in that case you are asking for a vote of credit. So I hope you got the difference. Here the scheme is new, but here the scheme is old, but the estimation is impossible. And then exceptional grants. So this is something like act of God. So it is a grant for a special purpose and it forms no part of the current service of any financial year. So something like disasters and others, in such cases exceptional grants can be availed for. And then the token grant. It is granted when funds can be made available by reappropriation. So what is reappropriation friends? Taking from other department and putting to the other department. So a demand for grant of a token of sum of rupee 1 is submitted to the vote of Lok Sabha, and if assented, funds are made available. So if this 1 rupee is granted, then you can take the X money from railway department and you can put to the defense department. So this is how the token grant is done. So this is all about the grants. Then coming to next, the Ministry of Cooperation. Friends, why was it in news? Because the central government has recently created a new Ministry of Cooperation. And now, what are the features of this new ministry, friends? It has the vision of Sahkar se Samruddhi. So Sahkar, or the cooperative system, it brings in development. And then it aims to provide a separate administrative, legal and policy framework for strengthening the cooperative movement in the country. Yes, it does it. And then to streamline the process of ease of doing business in the cooperative sector. And now, in this context, friends, what are the famous laws that the ministry is catering to? It is the National Cooperative Societies Act and also the Multi-State Cooperative Societies Act. So these two laws will come under the jurisdiction of Ministry of Cooperation, and the State Cooperative Societies Act, they will come under the jurisdiction of the states. In this context, we revise the 97th Constitutional Amendment Act. Friends, this Constitutional Amendment Act, it gave a Part 9B and it provided for the working of cooperatives in India. So friends, we know that Part 9 is for rural local governance, then Part 9A is for urban local governance, and Part 9B regarding the working of cooperatives. And then in the Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause C, the word cooperatives was added after the unions and associations. And now, along with the right to form unions and associations, even the formation of cooperatives is a fundamental right for Indian citizens. And then a new article named 43B was added in the Directive Principles of State Policy, or the Part 4, regarding the promotion of cooperative societies. So this article provided that the state shall promote the cooperative societies at all costs. So this is all about the Ministry of Cooperation and 97th Amendment Act. Then come to next, leader of opposition. Friends, leader of opposition is in news because, friends, we know that the CEC post, then the CBI post are being vacant, and leader of opposition is one of the main members of the committees to appoint these higher officers. So in this context, leader of opposition will come into picture. And now it is a statutory post defined in the Salaries and Allowance of Leaders of Opposition in Parliament Act 1977. So this act provides for leader of opposition. And moreover, friends, leader of opposition is having a cabinet rank. So he is equivalent to a cabinet minister. And moreover, the act says that leader of opposition is the leader in that house of the party in opposition having greatest numerical strength and recognized as such by the chairman or speaker of that house. So in other words, we can say that the leader of the second largest party in the house becomes the leader of opposition. But however, friends, this 10% formula, it is not being present in this 1977 Act. So this 10%, which states that in order to become a leader of opposition, the party should get minimum 10% of seats. That is, out of 545, 55 seats should be attained. And then the 10% rule was in fact brought in the year 1985 by the then speaker Balram Jakar to deny the position to a party from Andhra Pradesh. Friends, we know that during the Rajiv Gandhi tenure, TDP was the second largest vote getter in Lok Sabha, but however, to deny the leader of opposition position to this party, Balram Jakar, he came up with this 10% formula. And coming to more about leader of opposition, he is the member of appointing committee to all these officers. That is, to appoint CVC, then to appoint CBI, to appoint CIC, the Chief Information Commissioner, then National Human Rights Commissioners, then Lokpal. For all these, he will be a member of appointing committee. So we will discuss who are the other members when we take up the constitutional bodies chapter. Then coming to next, the political parties registration tracking management system. So why was it in news, friends? Because Election Commission of India has launched a political parties registration tracking management system. So this new project was being launched. So this is a simple project. The salient feature is that the applicants will be able to track the progress of his or her application and will get the status updates through SMS and email. So once you are going to register a party, you will get the updates regarding the progress of the registration regarding SMS and email. Friends, we know that many political parties in the last general election, they tried to register, but it was cancelled in the last moment. So in this way, this system was brought in. Now, coming to some of the legal provisions related to registration of parties. Registration of political parties is governed by the provisions of Section 29A of the Representation of People Act 1951. And then, an association seeking registration has to submit an application to the Election Commission of India within a period of 30 days following the date of its formation. So within 30 days of you forming a political party, you have to get it registered. Then come to next, what are the benefit of registering a party? So a registered party is entitled for an exclusive allotment of their reserved symbols. So you will be having a separate symbol and that will be exclusive for you. And then recognized state and national parties need only one proposer for filing the nomination. Friends, you know that if you are standing as an independent candidate, you need 20 people as proposers. But however, if you are contesting elections in the party tickets, which is a state party or a national party, then only one proposer is sufficient. And then the registered party is entitled to 2 sets of electoral rolls free of cost. So 2 electoral roll sets you will get. Then they also get broadcast or telecast facilities over Akashvani or Doordarshan. So these public channels, they will give air time for these registered parties. And then the travel expenses of star campaigners are not to be accounted for in the election expense accounts of the candidates of their party. So friends, we know that 4 lakh rupees is the limit for election expenses for a candidate. But if you are contesting from this registered party, then for those campaigners and the money spent on those campaigners, that will not be accounted within this 4 lakh rupees. So this is not so important, friends, because we know that crores and crores of rupees are spent in election and 4 lakh is a nominal sum. Then come to next, NHRC or the National Human Rights Commission. Friends, we know that NHRC was in news because it was investigating the floating dead bodies in Ganga River. And now coming to NHRC, it was established under the Protection of Human Rights Act 1993, and the act also provides for the creation of the State Human Rights Commission as well. And then coming to the composition, the chairperson is a retired Chief Justice of India or a judge of a Supreme Court. And friends, moreover, we have 11 to 12 members in the NHRC. The first one is the chairperson, we know that, and second member, he will be the Chief Justice of a High Court or a judge of a High Court. And then we will be having 3 members or specialists. Out of them, at least one should be woman member. And later we have the chairman of National Commission for Scheduled Caste, then the chairman of National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, then the chairman of National Commission for Backward Classes, then the chairman of National Commission for Women, and then we have Chief Commission for Person with Disabilities and many others if the government provides by law. So these are the members of NHRC, and then these members are appointed by the President on the recommendations of a committee consisting of Prime Minister, Speaker of Lok Sabha, then Deputy Chairman of Rajya Sabha, then Leader of Opposition in both the houses of the Parliament and the Union Home Minister. So this is the appointment committee. And then the term and removal. So they hold office for a term of 3 years or until they attain the age of 70, whichever is earlier. And then the President can remove them from the office under specific circumstances. So the specific circumstances are not mentioned. So any circumstances which are deemed fit, that can be the grounds of removal. Then come to next, the Protection of Human Rights Amendment Act 2019. So the recent one, once again it becomes important, we will take it up. The composition of NHRC. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court was amended to the Chief Justice or the Judge of Supreme Court. So now who can become the chairperson? Any person who was a Chief Justice or a Judge of a Supreme Court. So both Chief Justices and former judges, they are eligible for becoming the chairman of NHRC. Earlier only Chief Justice was eligible. Then inclusion of a woman member. So the 2 specialists was increased to 3 specialists, and among the 3 specialists, one should be compulsorily a woman member. And then other members. So the chairpersons of NCSC, NCST, NCW, NCPCR, the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights, then National Commission for Backward Classes, then Chief Commissioner for Person with Disabilities. So they all become the ex officio members of NHRC. Then terms of office. So 5 years till the age of 70 was earlier, and moreover the reappointment was capped for the maximum 5 years. So in other words, the member of NHRC had a 5 years term and he was eligible for further 5 years of appointment, that is only one extra term. And now it is, the term is reduced to 3 years till the age of 70 and the cap has been removed. So after 3 years, the member can be appointed n number of times until he or she attains the age of 70. Come to next, union territories. Friends, the central government may confer on a state human rights commission the human rights functions being discharged by a union territory. So the State Human Rights Commission, they can take the charge of union territories as well if the central government confers them. Then the functions related to the human rights in the case of Delhi will be dealt by National Human Rights Commission alone. So human rights of Delhi will not be conferred on any state human rights commission, that will be dealt by NHRC alone. Then come to next, borrowing powers of the state. Friends, why was it in news? Because recently the central government increased the borrowing limit of the states to 5% of the gross state domestic product in 2020-21 from 3%. So from 3% it was increased to 5%. So in this context, the borrowing powers of the state will come into picture. So friends, Article 292 and Article 293, these two articles they provide for the borrowing powers. So we will discuss with the 292 first. So 292 provides for the Government of India's borrowing power or the central governments. So we will begin with the Government of India. The executive power of Union extends to borrowing upon the security of Consolidated Fund of India. So by pledging the Consolidated Fund of India as a security, the central government can borrow, and within such limits to be fixed by the Parliament by law, and to the giving of guarantees within such limits. So the limits are that Parliament can by law fix the limits, or in other words, the capacity of the Consolidated Fund of India to give the guarantees will become the limit. So if you have 5,000 crores in the Consolidated Fund of India, you cannot borrow 10,000 crores. You can borrow only 5,000 crores, that's it. Then come to next, Article 293, borrowing by the states. The executive power of the state extends to borrowing within the territory of India upon the security of Consolidated Fund of States. Yes friends, the state have the power to borrow only within the territory of India, but however the central government can borrow even outside the territory of India. Then within such limits to be fixed by the legislature of such state by law, and to the giving of guarantees within such limits. So once again the limits are as same as those for the central government. And then the Government of India may give loans to any state or give guarantees in respect of loans raised by the state subject to the limits. So any such limits which is equivalent to the guaranteeing capacity of the Consolidated Fund of India, and also in compliance with the law made by the Parliament, the central government can give loans to the state, or it can give guarantee to the states if they are taking loans from the market. And then any sums required for such loans shall be charged on the Consolidated Fund of India. So this one good clause, it has been included in the Constitution. And then a state may not, without the consent of the Government of India, raise any loan if there is already a pending loan, or if the center has been giving a guarantee for this already pending loan. So if you are having a loan already, and if the government is already giving a guarantee to it, then further it cannot give guarantees, and you need to take the consent of the central government to borrow in that case. And then consent under the clause 3 can be given by imposing certain conditions. So it is not that a complete no will be said, the consent will be given by imposing some necessary conditionalities to the states. So this is all about the borrowing power of the states. Then come to next, governor. Friends, governor will be always in use, and recently 8 governors are being appointed by the central government. So in that context it will become important. So now we will discuss almost all the powers and functions of governor. We will be fast. You need not take down the notes, just listen friends. Coming to appointment. So appointed by the president by his warrant under his hand and seal. So president will appoint the governor on the advice of Council of Ministers. And term of governor's office. He holds the office under the pleasure of president, and there is no fixed term. Yes, we know that. Then removal, removed by the president, and the grounds are not laid down in the constitution. So he can be removed any time for any reasons. And then governor may also get transferred and reappointed. So one state governor can go to other state, and the state governor can be reappointed. And then the Chief Justice of High Court can also be appointed as the governor on a temporary basis. So just like how if the president and vice president posts, if they fall vacant, the Supreme Court Chief Justice of India, he will become the acting president. In the same way, the Chief Justice of the High Court, he can become the new governor. Then qualification, only 2 qualifications suggested by the Constitution, that is, he should be an Indian citizen and he should be 35 years or more. Then come to next, however, some of the conditions are being stipulated by the parliamentary law, that is, he cannot be a member of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and if he is a member, he should vacate his office on the first day of him becoming the governor. And then he should not hold any office of profit. We have discussed office of profit in the last class, and then Parliament decides his emoluments. So his salaries, emoluments and all those gratifications will be decided by the Parliament by law. And then when a governor is for 2 or more states, then the emoluments are shared by the states, and in what proportion these salaries should be shared will be decided by the president. So not by Parliament, by the president. Then Parliament cannot diminish his salary during his term of office. So Parliament can increase the salary, it cannot diminish. And then he is given immunity for any criminal proceedings, even in respect of his personal acts. Yes, just like president, he is given the immunity against criminal proceedings. Then civil proceedings can be initiated for his personal acts after giving 2 months notice. So this is same as that for president, don't need to revise once again. Then executive powers of governor. So every executive action in the state is taken in his name, and then he can make rules to simplify the transaction of business. So almost all the executive resolutions, orders, policies, etc. will be taken in the name of the governor. Then he performs the appointment activity. He appoints chief minister, council of ministers, advocate general and other senior officials of the state. Then it is his responsibility to appoint tribal welfare minister in the state of Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh and Odisha. So friends, we know that from article 371 to article 371J, there are specific clauses for different states. In those category, these 4 states, they will be having a criteria, that is the governor should appoint tribal welfare minister. So in that context, this clause will become important. Then the governor enjoys extensive executive powers when there is a president's rule. Yes, we know that, friends. Then come to next, legislative powers of governor. So he has the power to summon, prorogue and even dissolve the assembly. Then he addresses the first session of assembly every year. Then giving an assent, sending back the bill or reserving the bill for president. So all these 3 things the governor can do. Then appoints a person to preside over the session when speaker and deputy speaker are absent. So once again, this is also equivalent to the power of a president. Then nomination powers. He nominates some persons for the state legislative council. Then he can promulgate ordinance just like the president. And then he should place the report of State Finance Commission, then State Public Service Commission and other reports in the legislature. Then coming to financial powers of the governor, he looks over the state budget. Yes friends, we know that the state budget will be done under the aegis of chief minister, and this will be under the aegis of president in turn. And then his recommendation needed for money bill. So the recommendation of governor is a must for introducing a money bill. Then he recommends for the demand of grants which otherwise cannot be given. Even for the demand for grants, the governor's permission is required. Then contingency fund is his prerogative. Then State Finance Commission is appointed by himself. Then come to next, the judicial powers of governor. So pardoning powers, we have studied about the pardoning powers of governor in the last class. Then president consults the governor while appointing the judges of high court. So you will be having a consultative role here. And then appointments, postings and promotions of district judges will all be taken care by the governor. So this is all about governor. Then come to the last part. Friends, we know that in this age of preparation, we will be having several problems. Maybe the problem of concentration, maybe the family problems, maybe the financial problems or anything for that matter, even the health problem. Friends, mind that Adolf Hitler, he said one thing, that is, if you succeed without any problems, I repeat, if you succeed without any problems, you win a victory. But if you succeed in spite of all problems, you will win a history and you will create your own history. And friends, be brave, go on to create history of your own. Do not just live like a government employees. So all the very best. Good luck, friends.